Hello. In my part of the world, I run a youth center in Oakland, California. It's a city-block-long beacon of hope located in the midst of a challenging urban environment. By urban environment, I mean high rate of homicide, sexual trafficking, gang violence, in the midst of a food desert. Yet alcohol can be found on almost every corner. Our center is a hub of artistic, educational, career, and wellness success, and it has been for almost 4 decades. We serve youth at all ages and stages of life. Our secret sauce, wait for it, is getting kids to take risks to connect. Now, while connection is an equal opportunity challenge because it requires risk, compassion, and investment of time, the rewards are typically great. Many of my families live in poverty, and that makes their young people some of the hardest to connect with because they don't have a lot of relationships with trusted adults and not much exposure outside of their zip code. Also, my young people are afflicted with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. CPTSD affects the poor twice as much because of the violence they see and hear in their environment, which could be compared to a battlefield. Our center is the safe house inside that battlefield. Our young people are unfortunately stuck there, and like soldiers across seas, our kids never leave their battlefield, and as a result, must remain in that trauma. When young people come into our center, they are bracing for disappointment. They're watching everything to see how it feels. I mean, can they really believe that people are genuinely there to educate, support, and love them? One of my youth was particularly skeptical about her ability to find hope within our walls, or anywhere for that matter. Her transformation was particularly extreme. Meet Yumika. Yumika was selected to go on an international delegation to China that I led several years ago. Why China? Well, China is competing with the US for superpower status. And so President Obama created the 100,000 Strong in the Americas initiative to ensure that 100,000 of us could get to China, create relationships, and work together. The Congressional Black Caucus decided to focus on African Americans because of all the ethnicities, we travel the least. We also have some diametrically different experiences. The Chinese have a plethora of institutional history, whereas we can barely trace back 2 or 3 generations, which, if you're paying attention, is a great example of no connection. Yumika came with high praise as a youth with great potential. She was bright, beautiful, well-spoken, a cheerleader, member of the track team, a real social butterfly. Sounds like a perfect teen, right? Well, not quite. You see, it'd be easy to make assumptions based upon what I told you. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect teen was a fearful, vulnerable young woman with no confidence, no family stability, no direction, and no exposure outside the 20-block radius of her zip code. Yumika agreed right from the start that she would go to China. Yet, when the orientations came, she was nowhere to be found. She missed the first and second orientation. Most people at this time would be like, cut her, let's get on to the next one. But we know our young people, so we took a risk. We leaned in. I made a beeline up to the school to talk to her, to try and encourage her to participate. And it seemed like my conversation was falling on deaf ears when, in frustration, I said, "Come on, tell me what's going on." And her reaction surprised me. She actually opened up. She said that she was not worthy to take this opportunity. Wow. Yumika didn't see her potential as we did. Unfortunately, a lot of our kids don't see their potential as soon as we do. It's our experience in youth development. And while there's no playbook to ensure outcomes, taking risks is what we do. Yumika was afraid. We understood that. So we needed to build her up, affirm her worth. We didn't focus on the 4.0 student, but rather the middle-of-the-road great getter. And they had a lot of hidden promise. Since we didn't have great grades to focus on, we turned to her remarkable attributes. Yumika was honest, sometimes brutally. Yumika was charismatic, and most importantly, Yumika was a survivor. It took some extra conversations to dig deeper into her background, and what we uncovered was layers of trauma. Yumika was estranged from her family, which included a mom who cycled in and out of jail. She was obviously struggling with skeletons in her closet, and this manifested by the way in which she resisted taking risks. Now, some of the situations we saw with Yumika might sound familiar to you. Our high schoolers, a lot of them have superficial friendships. Most have no idea what it takes to create a healthy relationship. They'd rather stand next to each other and text rather than really connect. Investing a little bit more time in Yumika, we were able to get her to a couple of the bonding trips. The Port of Oakland for an educational briefing, and the Asian Art Museum for a cultural experience. The opportunity to get to know more delegates was very important because prior to this, she didn't know most of the young people that she would travel with. When we got close to getting on that 12-hour flight, we were reminded that Yumika was one of several delegates who had never flown before. Yumika was afraid, and she walked up and down that plane because her track legs cramped. But in between the movies and sleeping, she had some great conversations with her fellow delegates. These deeper connections sustained her through the fear of another country, a different language, and a busy academic schedule. She championed through. And when she landed in this new and foreign place, she was already part of a tight-knit group. 9 days into, thank you. 9 days into our trip, after demanding history and Mandarin classes, awe-inspiring field trips to landmarks, and a few priceless bonding sessions, we headed to a youth center in Lechuan. The thing that's most poignant about this trip is that everyone had an experience with the youth center. As we entered, Yumika pointed out the glaring differences. The Chinese youth center was much smaller. It had sparse furniture, dirt floors, and a hole for a bathroom. Yumika whispered, "My poor ain't poor." All right, as she shared that observation, she connected with what she knew about poverty and recognized that this was poor beyond her experience, her anticipation, or her expectation. Right then and there, she made a revelation that she wanted to engage more and give more and connect more and make sure that these young people had a wonderful experience. Thank you. As our delegates walked through, they decided about how would they communicate. I mean, they didn't speak the same language. We'd only had 6 hours of Mandarin, not the easiest language to master. They strategized, and they decided that games, art, and dance would be the best measure to break the ice. So we taught a game called Zoom, and we danced the Cupid Shuffle. Yeah! We painted a mural. And there was so much energy and enthusiasm. We saw the universal language of laughter and excitement on both sides. Yuma blossomed and creativity shined. By the end of the day, we had a living example of unity through connection. And now, this is Yuma. Yumica's transformation happened right before our eyes. She went from hopeless to hopeful. She was like a rosebud in full bloom. Her transformation spanned the entire spectrum. But we see transformations like this in our youth center each day. We've come to call this progression, the transformation process. First, you have survival. This is a stage that we find most of our kids in, and Yuma was no different. Refusing to meet us, resisting connection. Next, you have, trust. As I made the beeline up to school to try and get her to participate, and we created some common ground in affirming her worth, she in turn took those first steps to trust with us. As she learned that she could trust us, we went for exploration. We got her to those bonding trips for the Port of Oakland and the Asian Art Museum, and actually piqued her interest in exploring. She explored just enough to get some confidence. It took a lot of confidence to just get on that plane. I mean, her first trip ever to China? But the real confidence shined when she was in that youth center and she made that revelation and that commitment right then and there to engage more. I guarantee you that it takes a confident person to make a declaration like that. And now the final stage, success. And I am so proud to say that this is the stage that Yuma is in now. She has made a transformation, and she's taking risks, and she's blossoming. Now, the American Youth Policy Forum confirms that children that go to out-of-school programs do so because of caring adults and positive mentoring relationships. We know that the research confirms our work, and that we want all of our young people to get to that last stage called success. But what we recognize is that in reality, it's not so easy. It takes us, all of us involved, to take that risk. Yuma's transformation was really amazing. I mean, here was a girl that wouldn't even let me touch her on the shoulder in the beginning. She grew from not hugging a single person to doing that pat on the back and, you know, that half hug that the kids do, to holding a full embrace. This propelled her to take other risks, like go to college. She is now a sophomore in college outside of her zip code, outside of her city, in Southern California. And she's not just surviving, she's thriving. Yuma recently wrote in a blog that when a community serves as role models to share examples of excellence and success for kids that don't see them, that is pure gold. That is love. Yumika's transformation, or rather like Yumika, won't you consider taking a risk to connect in order to transform your life, or maybe someone else's? That bridge from hopeless to hopeful is realized when you take that first step outside of your comfort zone. What are you waiting for? Thank you.